Hi, it's Barry Neal here, and in this short video what I want to do is to cover what I consider to be the two primary skills that you need to develop to become a better therapist. And these two skills will transform the way you do therapy. You'll be so much more effective. You'll be able to see things that other people don't see. You'll be able to get changes much more quickly and easily than other people, and you'll be able to have much greater success with your clients. So what are these two skills? These two skills, in my opinion, are the primary skills you need to develop, and that's one is sensory acuity or calibration, and the other one is state elicitation. These two skills are the most important things you can learn. Why are they so important? Well, because you need to know exactly where you are when you're working with a client. You need to know what is going on in the mind of the client. Are they following along with what you're doing? Are they literally taking on board what you're saying? And are you able to elicit states, new states in the right order and the right sequence for them to get their change? You will know, if you do this, by the end of the session, has anything changed? You will know this before they know. So these are two really, really important skills for you to learn. So let's look at the first one, and that is sensory acuity. This is really about calibrating to the client moment to moment. Now, if you come from a background where you've been taught scripts, this is probably something you've never really paid attention to, because you can't do both. You can either read a script or you can calibrate to your client. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so vocal about being against scripts, because you are missing the action. You are missing the most important part of the process if you're paying attention to a piece of paper and not paying attention to what is going on moment to moment in your client. So let's have a look. So, excuse me, art is not my skill. So let's do a little drawing there. Okay, now when you're talking to your client and when they're thinking, information is coming in and they are going to create what's called an internal representation. They're representing what you're saying and what they're thinking about in their mind. So they're getting some sort of representation in their mind. And at any moment in time, that is going to be shifting. So hopefully, if you're a good therapist, you want to be shifting their internal representation. Because when they come in, they've got a certain internal representation of the problem. And what we need to do is to shift it. And you need to know how that's going. So when you shift an internal representation, what will happen is there will be a shift in their external behaviour. There'll be some shift in their internal behaviour when you create a shift in their internal representation. So the external behaviour will shift when something happens in their mind. So if you say a certain thing, if they take that on board, a subtle shift will happen. And if you're paying attention to your client, you'll be able to see this. You'll be able to see this easily and know that whatever suggestion or reframe or state shift you've done is starting to take effect. So it's really, really important to pay attention to all this so that you can work out whether there is a shift in your external behaviour. So what are you paying attention to? Well, there's a lot of information. So you need to put down your scripts and you need to look at your client. Pay attention to your client from moment to moment. So some of the things you can look at is what's going on facially. There'll be some change in their face in some way. There could be some change in their body language. There also could be, if you're conversing with them, which I hope you do, that you don't just sit there and give them a monologue, there'll be some change in their tonal quality of their voice. So you need to start calibrating you need to start calibrating from moment to moment. Now, there are some big things you can calibrate to, but the really important stuff is often the small stuff, which most people miss. So you want to be looking first visually at the visual small shifts. And they would, number one, you want to be looking at changes in skin colour. Now, you don't need to be a therapist to know that when a person changes a state, there's often a change in their skin tone, their skin colour. If someone blushes and gets embarrassed, there's a real obvious cue. But it also happens all the time. From moment to moment, there will be skin colour changes when someone is changing their internal representation. So the first thing I'm asking you to do is start to pay attention to their skin colour. If you say something, if you ask them to think about something or you suggest something and you notice a skin colour change, calibrate to that. Now, here's the thing. The biggest mistake that people do is that they mind read what that means. They will think, oh, he's doing X, that must mean Y. Big mistake. And this is one of the big problems that the body language interpretation people have had for years, is that some people learn a little bit of it and think, oh, that's it. So if someone's crossing their arms, that means they're closed off. No, it doesn't. No, you have to be calibrating. So you need to be paying attention to what is happening right now in the external environment and what is happening with them, and you start noticing a pattern. You don't mind read as to what that means. So you just think, so if you're talking to a person and you see a skin colour change, just think, right, okay, their skin colour changed when I did this or when that happened. And you just notice it. So you're not ascribing any meaning to this whatsoever. You are just noticing it. So the next thing you can notice are minute muscle changes in their face. Now, this could be changes around the muscles in the eyes, around the mouth, it could be in the forehead, anywhere, any changes in the skin toners. And if you really want to get into this, I highly recommend that you check out Paul Ekman's work. Paul Ekman is the psychologist who is behind the TV program Lie to Me. And he has spent years and years and years decoding people's facial expressions, particularly the minute micro expressions that people make from moment to moment. And his work is incredible. I highly recommend that you do that, because that is really, really good. So you want to be calibrating to the minute muscle changes in their face. Another key indicator you want to pay attention to is lower lip size. Depending on how a person's thinking, extra blood can flow to their lower lip. Now, this often happens obviously in a sort of sexual situation, that if you're flirting with someone, blood flows to certain parts of the body and it can flow to the lower lip. But obviously, hopefully we're not doing that in our client sessions, but there will be changes from moment to moment in their lip size depending on what they're thinking. So it's another thing you can pay attention to. Another one is pupil dilation. And again, this may be something that you've heard about in attraction and things like that. When someone's attracted to them, their pupils dilate. And certainly it's true, but it's not just in that situation. If you know any poker players, one of the reasons a lot of poker players now wear sunglasses all the time is because it's known that if a person gets a good hand, their pupils dilate. So it's a real powerful tell that often happens in poker. And strangely enough, I know someone who was trained in NLP and learned all these things, and rather than become a therapist, he went off to become a poker player, and he's done surprisingly well. So these are really useful skills in not just the therapy context. Then you want to be noticed changes in breathing. Now this is a really big one. I highly recommend that you pay attention to the person's breathing, because this will really give you key information, particularly when you are working to find out the trigger of what triggers the behaviour. In NLP, we have something called synesthesias, which is when the senses overlap. So the person may say, for example, a perfect example of a synesthesia would be a phobia. Person sees spider, feels bad. The two things are linked together. But most problems that people come into your office with are going to be some version of a synesthesia. It's like maybe when the boss says this, they feel bad. Oops, clumsy. Or when X happens, they feel Y. And the two things become linked together. So typically it's something they see or something they hear causes them to feel bad. So you have what's called a synesthesia. Now, if you are using the meta model questions from NLP, you can track someone through their strategy. And the key is to find the synesthesia. What is the trigger? And one of the clues to finding the synesthesia is that the person will typically take a deep breath. So that you'll be questioning them, and you say to them, okay, so tell me about this. What happens? There you are with your boss. What happens? And they go, well, I don't know. I'm just standing there talking to him, and I don't know. And that's your synesthesia. Suddenly they looked up, they remembered something, and there's a change in their breathing. That is the trigger. So the breathing is really important. That's what you want to calibrate to. Now, years ago, funny enough, this came up on one of the groups the other day, because obviously in the current situation, a lot of people are now doing therapy online for the first time, and they're saying, well, this could be difficult. It might be hard because I can't really see the client. I can't touch the client. I can't, if there's a problem, I can't do this, I can't do that. And I butted in and said, look, hang on a minute. I used to do phone coaching. And I would listen to the person on the phone, and I'd be able to pick up the synesthesia on the phone. And they go, how on earth do you pick up a synesthesia on the phone? You can't see their eye patterns, you can't see all this information going on. And yeah, but I can listen to the breathing. Someone takes a deep breath, bingo, we're there. That's where we would need to make an intervention. So breathing is really, really important. The other thing is you want to be calibrating to is where their eye moves. Where their eye moves to. Now this is not like the standard NLP eye pattern chart. You've probably seen this as like the face with, visual construct or visual remembered and all that sort of stuff all over here. It's not that, but it's based loosely on that. When you ask a person to think about something, when they access that information, you'll notice that they'll look off in one way or another. A real good easy test for this, and this is going to be one of the exercises that we do in a little while, is to ask a person, think of someone you like, and they may go, yeah, okay, like where they put their eyes just there, that's where they mentally store the internal representation of that person. So you then say, okay, well, think about someone you don't like. And they go, yeah, okay, got one. That's the other one. And it's two different locations. Now, this is really important when you start building your solutions, because if you put the imagery, guided imagery, in the wrong place, it's not going to have the same effect. So there's an example is in NLP, we have something called the submodality belief change. And you ask the person, well, I want you to think of something you absolutely believe to be true. Like maybe the sun coming up tomorrow. And the person goes, yeah. And they're seeing this image over there. Now you don't have to elicit all the detailed submodalities. All you need to do is find the location. The location is one of the main keys to making these changes. It offers what they call a driver submodality. And so also then if you say to them, well, think about something that used to be true, but no longer is, and they go, yeah, okay, I've got something. Yeah, when I was 5 years old, I used to have a really lovely bike. Oh, right, it used to be true, it's down there. Now, this is different for everybody, so don't make a generalization. Now, here's the thing. If you were communicating with them and you use conversational change, which I do all the time, you can shift something like a limiting belief they have. You can mentally grab it and put it in that location of something what used to be true, but no longer is. And that in itself can create a massive change. So calibrate to their eye movements. Where do their eyes go when they're thinking about problems or solutions, whatever, and File that away, note that down, because that will become really important later. So those are the small things you can be looking at, but let's look at some of the larger things. Well, obviously, there are gestures. Be aware of their gestures. People will give away information all the time. I mean, I make big gestures all the time, but if you ask someone about their problem, you might notice them saying, well, it's, you know, it's like, oh, I carry this around like this, or they might gesture with one hand when they're talking about the problem, and another hand when they're talking about solution. They might move their body in some way. So pay attention to their gestures. The other big one is moving their body forward and backwards. It's kind of a universal, I don't think you want to check this out, but if you're talking to someone and they move in, they are much more likely to be okay with that situation, or to be in agreement with that. But if they back off, there's something not right there. They're kind of like putting some distance between you and that. So those are sorts of things you want to be paying attention to. Then, so these are all the visual things you can pay attention to. Then we've got the auditory. So the auditory means obviously when you ask them questions, they start talking back to you. You want to be paying attention not only to what they are saying, in fact what they're saying is probably the least important thing, but it's how they're saying it. So you want to be paying attention to the volume. Are there certain times where their volume increases or it goes down? You also want to be taking to the tone. Now this is quite an interesting one, because if you start talking to someone about the cause of a problem and they start talking in a kind of like a little girl's voice or a little boy's voice, they are mentally regressing. So you need to be making note of that. And that can be a clue of deciding whether or not you want to be using regression, because if they're already regressing in that, so be aware of the tone. Then there's the speed. You want to be paying attention to the speed in which they speak. Then the rhythm. And then what words they're using. Particularly pay attention to the pronouns. Pronouns will give you loads of information. If they're saying things like I this, I that, I the other, I this, I that, they're telling you that for whatever reason, significance is important to them. You really need to be paying attention to this. There's a really interesting TED talk on this, and off the top of my head I can't remember the guy's name. I'll find out the information and I'll put it in the link below. And he's written a whole load of information about it. I've done this study for years, and you can even tell from how people write, like if you ask them to write their story of their trauma or whatever, whether or not they may end up committing suicide or not, just by their use of pronouns. So really, really pay attention to the pronouns. So let's look at some exercises you can do whilst you're at home, whilst you've got nothing else to do, to start building sensory acuity. Well, the first thing is we can do right now, just to give you an idea. And I do this normally in an NLP training. Now it's easy on an NLP training when I've got a room full of people, because obviously I'm calibrating to them, and I know whether they're going to follow along with the instructions. So first of all, I'm going to stand like this, okay? And what I want you to do, whilst you're watching this right now, is to close your eyes. And then I'm going to make a subtle movement, and then I want you to open your eyes and for you to notice what the change is. Now, there are going to be some of the people who are watching this who aren't going to close their eyes. Well, then you're not going to learn anything. So you at the back there, sitting there with your laptop on your lap, close your eyes, and maybe you learn something. So go ahead, just close your eyes for a moment, and just keep them closed. And now open your eyes. What's changed? Now if you're paying attention, I've lifted my finger up here. Okay, so close your eyes, let's do it again. Now open your eyes. What's changed? Well, I've tilted my head over to the right. Now, what I suggest that you do is get someone you can practice with and start off doing like major movements like this. Get them to make major movements and you calibrate, and then tell them to make the movements more and more subtle and for you to then identify them. The only way is to start big movements and then narrow them down, and you will learn really quickly to notice subtle changes, from head nods to like muscle tightness in their face, clenching their jaw, all sorts of things like that. So that's the first one. The second exercise is, once you've got that down, work with a person in your family, friend or whatever, and get them to think of someone they like and tell you when they're thinking of that person. Then have them move around and move into a different position, and then have them think about someone they don't like, and do that for a couple of goes, so you absolutely know. So you change from someone you do like to someone you don't like, break state, someone you do like, someone you don't like, break state, and then to tell you at that point, okay, this is someone I like, this is someone I don't like, this is someone I like, this is someone I don't like, so you can get some sort of baseline. Then you have them randomly think of either one of those person without telling you, and your job is to guess which one it is. If you do that, you'll find this really easy. Then you get to the next exercise, is to have them think of something they'd say yes to, and then you calibrate to that, and then have the think about something they say no to, and you keep doing that, saying, okay, this is something I say yes to, this is something I say no to, this is yes, this is no. Keep doing that, and then for them to do it randomly again. And the